Welcome. We begin Part 2, Understanding Motivational Interviewing, with Lesson 5, What is Motivational Interviewing? I'm your instructor, Nicholas Cohen. In Part 1, we described how personal behaviors contribute more than anything else to our health, and that unhealthy behaviors are very common. We learned that most people who need to make a change are ambivalent about it. On the one hand, they want to change, and they think they can change. On the other hand, they don't want to change, and they don't think they can change. It's like they have an internal committee, with change talk members arguing for change and sustained talk members arguing against change. We learned that the traditional approach in healthcare is for the helper to identify the behavior that needs to be changed and to tell the person to change it. It's like identifying pneumonia and prescribing antibiotics. And while that approach works for pneumonia, we saw why it doesn't work for behavior change. When an ambivalent person is told what to do, they perceive a threat to their autonomy. And as described by the concept of psychological reactance, they resist being told what to do. In the case of the ambivalent person, hearing that they should change and that they can change, hearing the arguments of the change talk members of their internal committee essentially, causes them to side with the sustained talk members of their internal committee and to think they shouldn't change and can't change. And we learn from self-perception theory that people learn about themselves from their interactions with others. If they hear themselves saying they shouldn't change or can't change, they become convinced by what they hear themselves saying. In this way, the effect of a helper in the traditional approach is to make change less likely. The question is then, given what we know, is there an alternative approach to helping people change? If telling people what to do causes them to talk themselves out of change, can we find a way to talk people into change? This is the aim of motivational interviewing. It is a way of helping ambivalent people resolve ambivalence in favor of positive change. And it's done by the helper arranging the conversation so that people voice their motivations and confidence for change, rather than the helper making these arguments. The helper's role, then, isn't to argue for change, but to arrange the conversation so the ambivalent person argues for change, based on the ambivalent person's own motivations and own priorities. While MI might make intuitive sense, is there any evidence that it actually works? MI has been studied in many trials and in this large meta-analysis of over 70 randomized trials, which compared it to traditional advice giving. The authors found that motivational interviewing outperforms traditional advice giving in the treatment of a broad range of behavioral problems. So how do you actually do motivational interviewing? Well, MI is more than just a technique. It requires an attitude change on the part of the helper, especially if that helper was trained in this traditional healthcare model we've described. We turn to this attitude shift, or what's called the spirit of motivational interviewing, in the next lesson.